Hello everybody, thank you for joining me today for this session on the opening solo from Mahler's Fifth Symphony. This is a big one, and one that many people like to play. It's very exciting and powerful, and it shows a great deal about your trumpet skills. And so what I'm going to do today is practice through it and draw your attention to some things that you want to pay attention to when you're practicing, when you're recording yourself, when you're listening to those recordings, so that you can continue to refine the quality of what you're doing and be competitive in an orchestral audition. Even if you're not going to take an audition, all those skills will help you to play better with others, so to speak, because they have a great deal to do with time and with pitch, but also with stylistic nuance and the ability to adjust that, which allows you to kind of hear what another person is doing and then change your style in order to fit them as you need to do in this section of an orchestra. So this is a very famous piece. I'm just going to play the opening, just a little bit of it, and kind of we'll go through and take a survey of what's going on here. There are many, many points. We're not going to be able to cover everything in this session. If I feel like I need to make another video, or if I get requests for one, then I'll go ahead and do that. In the meantime, let's get right to work, okay? Here we go. Okay, so that's the big, exciting opening. And the whole orchestra comes in on that high A, as many of you know. Please forgive me if I'm not talking directly to you. I'm trying to, but I don't know who you are or where you are in your playing ability or what your goals are. So I'll have to make some general assumptions here. I'm going to try and deal with things that everyone who's trying to improve their playing can benefit from. Not just the things that if you're studying these excerpts, perhaps you're in a conservatory and you're studying with a very fine, experienced teacher, they're going to tell you many of the same things. If some of you have gone to master classes or you've studied with a variety of teachers, you're going to hear the same kinds of things, and that's a big clue. When you hear the same thing from more than one person, then you know that maybe your perception of it needs to get more awake, so that you can become aware of it yourself. We're going to be dealing with some of those things today. So right at the beginning, let's talk first about what I call pronunciation, which is, or you might think of it as diction or enunciation, having to do with speech that projects and is clearly distinct. So here I have a trumpet call, a little fanfare. And it says in the score, and this is where we can get more and more deeply into it, Mahler intended this as to be done in the style of a military fanfare. So what's written is 1 and 2, da-da-da-dum, and you've probably heard that nobody plays it like that. So how should you play it? It's useful to have concepts, musical concepts or physical concepts or visual concepts that help you to get the idea. This is a gesture, as I mentioned in the intro video I made. So that's a big part of it. And it's also a fanfare, so it has to be very clearly pronounced. So if you do something like this, you have a gesture, but it's kind of muddy. And remember, our diction has to be extremely clear, like that of a fine Shakespearean actor, so that the person in the very back of a large hall can hear precisely what's being said. And that's not really natural. You don't talk that way when you're speaking to others in normal conversation, and certainly not if you're talking on the phone. This is when you're projecting into a big space. It has to be clear. It doesn't matter how soft or loud it is, it still has to be very clear, enunciated. So that's one of the first things. Let your ear be your guide on this. Distinct. So let me try that again. I think I can do it better than that. So now we're getting into physical, technical things. You have to have a quick single tongue or a good multiple tongue that sounds crisp, if you will. That takes some work. Not everybody has those skills. So that's one of the things one of the ingredients, I call them, that you need to bring. That quick articulation. So one thing I can tell you about articulation is everybody calls it an attack because it sounds very abrupt and it's very affirmative, very intentional. But actually it's a release, because until you start playing, now I hope you can hear that. That's a good way to practice. If you take your finger and you hold it right in front of the airstream, if you don't hear much, that means you don't have that airstream focused, or there isn't enough spin, there isn't enough energy or flow to it. Don't try harder. It's a skill thing. It's like aiming at a specific target, at the bullseye of the specific target. So that's one way I would work on that. Let's do it some more. There's something else. It's not just the attack that is involved with pronunciation, not just the beginning of the word that you're speaking or the note that you're playing, it's the end as well. And this is really noticeable here. So you have to be very attentive to what the end of the note does expressively. And an easy way to deal with that in almost all circumstances is be intentional about the release. In other words, if you look at the part, you might see that it's a half note and there's a quarter note. Now you don't have to be rigid. You don't have to be a judge about this and say, well, it must, no. But you do have to be very intentional about where you're intending to let the note go into silence. That's what makes it work. So I'm going to work on that. And you hear there's a gesture, and I'm going to talk in a few minutes about pitch. When you're changing dynamics, when you're changing articulation, when you're using strong articulation and then more legato articulation or slurring, that's when most people have trouble with stability of the pitch. I'll get into that in a second. For now, I'm going to try and show you what I'm doing. I'm going to conduct, and I do this all the time for myself because it's a way of expressing visually what I'm thinking about the music. You see how I'm giving an ictus, a gesture, a very distinct gesture, as to where I'm going to release the note. The note itself, you see that it's tapering, but there's a distinct place to release. That also helps you if you play into the silence with the pitch. And it helps you very, very much with the pace. And that's another thing I'm going to talk about today. So these are three of the big things in this excerpt particularly. So I know you want to hear me play more. You can hear lots of good examples. You can hear people that play far better than I do, I think. So I'm trying to give you, I'm doing the best I can here to give you good examples. What I mainly want to give you is the insight to hear what it is that you're aiming for, what to pay attention to. That's a really good starting point. And then to develop your perception and your skills. Physical skills, mental skills, emotional skills, and of course aesthetic musical skills. That's the whole package. And then you're working on this excerpt and every other one that you do in all those areas, not just being able to play it physically. Okay, now I'm gonna go ahead and we'll talk about some other things, but keep in mind the pronunciation. Yeah, kind of a little scuff on that articulation. Why is that? This is a very exciting piece. It starts a little bit more intimate, a little bit more quiet, At least that's what Mahler had in mind. It's not always played that way, of course. And now you're at a new level of dynamic intensity and musical intensity, and you're going up in arpeggio. And there's a lot of quick activity. Many of you know that you need to use the slides, primarily the third valve slide, maybe the first valve slide, depending on your trumpet, in order to play. So there's a little bit of kind of choreography, in order to get that to work. That's all the detail. Your teachers can help you with that. Study with somebody who can help you with that. And give you stuff to practice and help you be aware of it. But the main gesture of going see the air when I'm playing the trumpet. So that's very forceful. I think that's clearly pronounced so that you'd hear that out in a hall. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. That's what you need. But a lot of people think you have to go and start working hard, and that's what I did. I built tension in, and now I have to either release that tension or I have to manage it as I continue to play through. And the same thing keeps happening over and over again. So I'm going to continue. And I'll give you a suggestion here. Reestablish your balance at every level. That's what you want to do. So if I'm overblowing on the C sharp, which is on a few recordings that you may know if you listen to recordings of this piece, I may overblow the note and have to kind of reestablish my balance. Well, that wasn't too bad. That was pretty solid. But if I'm going instead of, and I built up tension, I have to keep building more and more tension as I go up, finally arriving at the high A. This is the physical problem that most people have, and that's a different area, how to work on these things. This is what I really want to help you with. This is kind of my mission, is helping people to overcome the problems in their mechanics, the problems in their perception, the problems in their musical sensitivity, those especially the mechanical problems that keep you from doing the music that you may already hear perfectly well. And you may be frustrated. I know trumpet is a very frustrating instrument. It certainly can be. But when it works, it's glorious. So it's all worth it, right? Okay, I'm going to go ahead from there. Not well pronounced. Why? Because I'm already thinking about going higher. I need to chill. Now I'm starting to push. So if I can sing that high A relaxed, I've accomplished something. That's where you want to be. Why? Because what are you going to do next? A lot of people, when they practice, they'll stop at that point. They'll play that over and over again. Of course, that's a perfectly legitimate way to practice. But what happens? You're not ready to go on. I guess I wasn't ready to go on. I wasn't concentrating. Dom, dom. See how I'm conducting? Okay, sorry, that was a little self-indulgent. I was enjoying myself and I wanted to play to the end. Let's go back, take a look. What you're doing when you get to that A is you're sustaining it. Dee, da, 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 dee. So that's all at the top of the staff. And you need to play it as if you were sustaining a continuous note. And most people are kind of pounding away. Why? Because it has to be marcato, it has to be clear. That's one of the things that I was reminded of when I was studying the pronunciation and the rhythm. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da, da-da, da-da, da-da. So the precision, the accuracy, the consistency, and all those things, that's what you're aiming for. Practice it as an exercise. Play it in all keys. So, so you see I'm working it, and this is the way you want to practice. Now, rest enough, because this can be strenuous. Hopefully you're in good shape. You've been playing a lot, and your chops are nice and kind of kissing soft and very, very responsive. So this will not hurt you to work on this. If you feel too much stress, stop. A great way to practice is, I can strongly recommend this, and you're probably going to hear it more than once, because I found it an extremely useful discipline. Let's say I take a passage like this. Now, I'm going to rest, and I'm going to go through that passage mentally as if I were actually playing it with the same kind of mental intensity. While I'm doing that, I'm physically resting the same amount that I'm playing. And you can practice, potentially, you can practice all day that way, as long as you're not fighting yourself when you're playing, fighting yourself physically. So let's go ahead and see if we can finish this off in terms of pronunciation. When you go higher, it's normal to have more snap in the attack. When you go lower or softer, it tends to be a little bit more difficult. And what we're looking for here is consistency in this case. Check my score here. Oh yeah, interesting. Right at the end there, it says forte, da-da-ga-dong. Of course, everybody's playing double forte by that time. And then it says double forte on the low A flat. So for some people, that's not going to be any problem. Others, it'll be a challenge to do that. So these are some of the kinds of details that you want to be thinking about. Let's move on to another subject. Again, this is way too much to cover in one session, but I'll do what I can. Pitch. Pitch is really difficult for many, many people. It's not difficult until you try and play really well in tune. And when you do that, you can really hurt yourself. So I'm going to spend a fair amount of time in other sessions talking about how to practice, but I'll give you a basic idea that I think is really, really important. First, find your voice. And that means don't try and play in tune. Don't try and play out of tune. Try and play in alignment with, in agreement with, where the note wants to play in the horn. From there, you can find out how to play in tune without having to force and manipulate too much. You have to know where things are in the horn first. So how do you find that out? Well, it has to do with where the sound is. So I'm going to make some adjustments. I'll go back to the beginning. Well, I don't really like that tone. It's a little I need some focus in there, right? So that's what my ear is picking up. This is a matter of taste. It's I'll use this metaphor again, I'm sure. It's like cooking. In our family, I'm the cook. That's my responsibility. And I have a little knack for it, although I'm not a hobbyist by any means. I cook because I need to eat. and with music, it's the same thing. I need to learn how to use the ingredients, find the best ingredients, and then use those ingredients in exactly the right combination and balance, the right spices. So you might think of the sound as, that's a very important part of the ingredient here. And so is the pitch. They go together. Pitch is influenced, the perception of pitch is influenced by timbre. So when the sound has more brilliance in it, it tends to sound sharper. When the sound has more depth, more lower overtones, it'll tend to sound lower. And so these are all things that have to be dealt with in detail in order to make progress in really refining this kind of this particular excerpt, or any other excerpt for that matter. So it starts for me with a sound. And the ability to change dynamics without physically being stressed, keep maintaining your balance, and without changing the pitch. That's a critically important thing here. So the main thing you want to really notice about pitch, other than that you're playing the intervals in the proper relationship. And I'll get into that later again in much more depth. Different kinds of temperament systems and how to develop your ability to hear these things and how to practice them. And all great players, orchestra players, do this the same way. But we share our secrets with one another. So once you find that pitch, it has to remain stable. If it's not stable and the timbre doesn't stay balanced, then it's going to sound like you're playing out of tune, even if the tuner says that you're right. If the pitch is a little wobbly, that comes across as out of tune. It just doesn't sound right, and it's that stability that you're looking for. So that's something to be practiced. You can do it even when you play your scales. Any part of your normal warm-up. Put a drone on or use the tuner. Again, we'll talk about this later. How do you get there? Even great players sometimes have a lot of trouble controlling the pitch. As one of my colleagues in the BSO used to like to say, the pitch is a moving target in the orchestra. And it is, because the orchestra is an organism and it's alive. And keeping your balance is what it's really all about with pitch. So pitch, that's a discussion for another day, but remember, it's affected by timbre, and that stability in the pitch and proper interval relationships in the temperament system you're playing in, those are the key things. Okay, a couple more ideas and then I'll let you go, because this is a lot to think of in one session. The final one is something that I actually start with most of the time. It's pace. And the word is actually the German word for pace, which I'm not sure that I would pronounce correctly, so I'll leave that to you, is in the instructions in the score and in the principal trumpet part. It has to do with the fact that this is a funeral march. So you're pacing along, and it's a somber, serious. So you see I have a gesture going? See how that's an organic gesture? See how it's not mechanical? It's fluid, like a bouncing ball. This is pace. And as a famous jazz musician, Duke Ellington, liked to say, it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. And that's what we're talking about here. It's a swing. Now it is heavy because of the subject matter. This is a funeral march, right? A lot of people change the tempo, or they start more like a cadenza. So they might play it, like this. And see, you're giving an impression of tempo, but there isn't really any tempo. It's kind of confusing to listen to. You have to be in this, then you know where the gesture, you know where that's going to. Okay, now this is important because when you get louder, and you're playing higher, when you're concentrating more, your sense of time can shift. And so you really need to work a great deal to develop a solid sense of pace. A great way to do that is actually walk while you're playing. Now I can't do that today because I have to stand in front of the camera. But maybe on another occasion, if I get a videographer to help me instead of doing everything myself. But walking, actually pacing, when you're doing this can be a tremendous aid. So that's something you can definitely try. Now, when we play louder, when it gets more exciting, when we're concentrating more, like I said, our sense of time can shift. When the music gets more exciting, we tend to rush. You know, when the music is releasing energy and kind of calming down a little bit, we tend to slow down. This is a problem that all musicians have, whether they're aware of it or not. So a good way to do that is if you go, see how I'm conducting. See, I have to wait for it. This is this heaviness to the pace. Okay, I hope that gives you a few ideas. I know this is a lot to chew on. The great thing about video is you can go back and try things. You go back and think about things and then apply them to your playing. So I hope you go immediately and practice and that you get benefit from your practice if you're really seeing more clearly what it is that you're aiming at. And give yourself, be patient with yourself and persistent. Keep going after it, and especially try and hear what it is that you're aiming for. Okay? Thanks for spending some time with me today. I very much appreciate it. And I will see you later on down the road. Bye-bye.